Hey, it's Lara back with your horoscopes for the Cancer new moon on June 28th, 2022. Thanks for being here. So this new moon takes place on June 28th at 10:52 p.m. That's Eastern time, so you can adjust for your time zone. And it is at 7 degrees 23 minutes of Cancer. So these horoscopes will talk about what is being initiated for you at the time of this new moon. And it will take you through, the horoscopes will take you through the 2 weeks to the next full moon, which is the Capricorn full moon on July 14th. So these horoscopes are relevant for that 2 week period. And sometimes I bring in other things that are relevant for even longer than that, or that are particularly potent over the time of that particular part of the lunar cycle that we're talking about, either the waxing phase of the lunar cycle, so when the moon is growing from new to full, which is the case here, or the waning part of the lunar cycle, which are the 2 weeks from full moon to the next new moon. So in this particular video, we're talking about the waxing phase from a Cancer new moon to a Capricorn full moon. And that begins on June 28th. So there's quite a few interesting aspects going on in and around this new moon that we're going to talk about, interesting aspects and events. And we're going to talk about, what is the sign of Cancer? What does it symbolize? And the fact that Cancer is ruled by the moon, what's the relevance there? And then, of course, we're going to take it through all 12 signs, and I'm going to speak to each and every one of you about how this is relevant for you. So stick around for that. You can find me over at my website, astrologymaven.com. The link is always below if you're curious about taking a course with me or having a reading. There'll be other things coming up there. But if you want to sort of stay in the loop and find out when a new course launches or things like that, then please do join my email list, which is really easy to do over at my website. You just put in your first name and your email address. And when you do that, you get my free guide to working with the moon as well, to help you learn how to sort of, plan and even to kind of just start to notice and tune into how you're feeling and what kind of activities and things like that you're prone to doing when the moon is in particular signs, that sort of thing. So you can head over there to my website and get that for yourself if you haven't already yet. Okay, so let's talk about this new moon. As I was saying, new moon in Cancer, right? June 28th. So Cancer, first of all, what's a new moon? A new moon is always when the sun and the moon come together in a particular sign to conceive of something new and to eventually birth something new. So new moons are about the initiation of things. It's when we can choose to sort of intentionally plant new seeds towards something we want to grow in our lives, right? But sometimes new things come into our awareness and our experience, and those are things that we haven't even necessarily intended, but the universe has sort of intended them for us, right? So, but if you want to work intentionally with a new moon, the best way to do that is to pay attention to, what is the sign that moon is in? What house does that occupy in my particular birth chart? And so whatever you're choosing to initiate should involve those topics, right? And if this is sounding a little bit foreign to you and you're not quite sure what I'm talking about when I'm talking about houses in your birth chart and that kind of thing, then definitely check out my my birth chart basics course that I have over on my site. But so a new moon, sun and the moon coming together in a particular sign, in this case in the sign of Cancer, to conceive of something new, to eventually birth something new, right? And this particular new moon is actually in an exact square to the planet Jupiter. And Jupiter is in Aries. So the moon is at 7 degrees 23 minutes. Aries, Jupiter in Aries is at 7 degrees, 17 minutes. So very, very close, almost an exact square between Jupiter and the new moon. So we're going to talk about the relevance of that in a little bit here, but I just want to break down the other pieces that are happening. So we've got the square to Jupiter, which is the most significant thing that's going on in relation to this new moon. And then we have Jupiter, that's square the new moon, is in an exact sextile to Venus in Gemini at 7 degrees of Gemini. So we've got this opportunity kind of energy when we have a sextile here. And an easy flowing sort of friendly conversation that's happening between Jupiter and Venus at the time of this new moon. And that's relevant as well for a particular reason. And I'll mention that as well in a minute. But then we have Mars in Aries in a sextile to Saturn, which is in Aquarius. So not particularly like, this aspect is not speaking to the new moon per se, but it's happening at the same time as the new moon, right? So we've got Mars, our drive, our action, our passion, our will, our impulses, in a helpful, friendly, opportunistic conversation with Saturn. The rules, the boundaries, the tradition, the structures, the hard work, the patience, all of that. So those two things are working well together at the time of the new moon. And then we have on the day of the new moon, right, before, in the early morning hours, we have Neptune stationing retrograde. So Neptune station, it's an outer planet. It's a very slow moving planet. It stations retrograde every year for many months at a time, like between 5 and 6 months at a time. So that in and of itself is not particularly unusual, but what makes it relevant to this new moon is that it's happening on the same day. And when a planet stations retrograde or direct, we get the energy is amplified. The energy of that planet is amplified. We really notice it. And Neptune is a more, it's a planet that deals with, generations sort of thing. It's a generational planet. It's a planet that it's not a personal planet. It is an outer planet. So it speaks more to the topics of the kind of the zeitgeist, right? Like what's going on in the world. But we do sometimes have personal experiences with those outer planets if they are particularly triggered in our chart, or if they play a prominent role in our chart, then we'll tend to notice them more. And because, like I said, Neptune is stationing retrograde on the day of this new moon, that Neptunian energy will be noticeable. And it's also relevant because it is in a sextile with Pluto at the time, on the same day as the new moon in Cancer. So that Neptunian energy can play a role here, bringing in some potentially, like, one of the ways this can play out is there can be like an unveiling of something, or we get a sense like that there is like amplified sort of confusion going on and a seeking of clarity. There can be an amplification of compassion, a wave of compassion, mysticism, the dissolution of something, big water type events can sometimes happen when we have prominent Neptune energy. So those are some things to look for when we're talking about Neptune in particular. But I want to get back to what I was talking about in terms of the planets that are all at 7 degrees, right? So we've got obviously this new moon. So the sun and the moon are at 7 degrees Cancer. Then we have Jupiter at 7 degrees Aries in an exact square. And then we have Venus in Gemini at 7 degrees exactly sextile Jupiter and Aries. So what I want to say about Venus is that, like, why would this be relevant? Because Venus is in Gemini, Venus isn't in Cancer, where the new moon is right now. Venus isn't even making an aspect to the new moon right now, but it is making an aspect to Jupiter, who is making an aspect to the new moon. And over and above that, it just so happens that this new moon is happening in what we call the first decan of Cancer, right? Or first decan. I sort of overpronounced that. So each zodiac sign, I'm just going to give you the real short and dirty version here. Each zodiac sign has 30 degrees. And so therefore it's kind of divided into 10-degree segments. And each of those segments we call a decan. So every sign has, 3 decans. And so in this case, and each of those decans is ruled by a particular planet. So in this case, the first decan of Cancer, from 0 to 10 degrees of Cancer, is actually ruled by the planet Venus. So Cancer as a whole is ruled by the moon. That's the most important thing to know. But then there are, particular degrees of Cancer that have an affinity with other planets. So in this case, the first 10 degrees is ruled by Venus. And so we've got Venus in this sextile to Jupiter and Aries. So it's like we kind of want to pay attention to what Venus is doing too, right? In this case. And it is a sextile Jupiter. So this will all become a little more clear to you as we go through. I go through my notes here and I speak to you about the various pieces and how they work together before we get to the horoscopes. So let's talk about Cancer in general, in terms of what is Cancer as an energy. What are the qualities of Cancer? Cancer is a cardinal water sign, right? And the cardinal signs are the initiators. They mark the beginning of the 4 seasons. So we have Cancer, Capricorn, Libra, and Aries are all cardinal signs. They are the impulse that begins things, the initiators, the instigators. So they have that kind of energy of, kind of forward momentum, starting things, beginning things. And this is a new moon. So when there's a new moon and a cardinal sign, the initiation of whatever it is can feel like a true beginning, right? So we've got that. It's a water sign. The water signs deal largely with things like our sensitivities, our emotions, the unseen realm, our bonds, those sorts of things. So, and it's symbolized by the crab. Cancer is symbolized by the crab. And I feel like that's, it's helpful to know, because we can, when we look at the symbol for a particular sign, we can also get a sense of the qualities of that sign. So in terms of the association with the crab, when you think of a crab, right? Well, crabs live in the water. And they often are revealed when, the tides, they have a relationship to the tides, the ebb and flow of the tides. And they also have this hard, kind of tough exterior, right? Shell. And then the soft, sensitive, mushy inside. And that really describes Cancer. Crabs can be very, they can lash out if they are threatened in any way, right? So the pinchers can come out, or they can kind of skitter away and go in this direction and that direction. They can retreat back into their safety, the safety of their home, kind of thing. And so that speaks to some of the qualities of Cancer, definitely. some other qualities of Cancer. Cancer is known as the sign of it's the great mother, right? So connected with initiating that cardinal piece, like emotional bonds, connected with initiating familial bonds, emotional security, bodily comforts, nurturing, the concept of mothering. And that doesn't necessarily have to mean biological mothering. Okay, it could, but it doesn't have to be. Cancer is sensitive and protective and moody or temperamental, if you will, right? So if you think about Cancer being ruled by the moon, and there's that being really impacted by the ebbs and flows of the tides. So the emotional ebbs and flows are something that we see in Cancer energy. Cancer can be private, habitual, and when I say that, I mean like sort of like those daily sort of home rituals and things like that we do, right? That help us feel nurtured and safe and secure. Cancer is connected to the ancestors. Oftentimes, cancers are sort of keepers of the family lore and the artifacts. They can be homebodies very much, who are sort of like the center of the wheel, right? Or that can be in friend groups as well. It can be in like chosen family groups, right? Any kind of sort of tribe. You can see that Cancer energy as the one who's sort of kind of keeping the familial, whether it's your family of origin or chosen family, bonds, keeping everybody together, feeding people and making them feel comfortable and welcoming them into their space, and making them feel like part of the family sort of thing. So when we have a new moon in Cancer, there is something new on offer that is related to these themes of home, family, potentially ancestry, tribe, emotions, right? Emotional and bodily security, even nurturing mother figures, and that's regardless of gender, the idea of motherhood in some way. So, and we also have Jupiter in the mix. Like I said, there is this square from Jupiter to the new moon. And so Jupiter is a planet that is connected to concepts like growth, optimism, abundance, wisdom, questing, things like justice. Jupiter can be associated with as well. The big picture. And Jupiter has this way of expanding whatever it comes into contact with. And so usually, as the great benefic, it's known as, Jupiter is cause for celebration in some way, meaning that it tends to be very helpful and bring in good things. But things that we don't want can also expand, right? So we kind of have to keep that in mind. So sometimes Jupiter can overpromise and underdeliver. Jupiter can it's like doesn't know when to stop. It's there's such a thing as too much of a good thing. So it can be the overdoing it, overgrowth, overshooting. All of these things can also be associated with Jupiter. But generally, as a benefic planet, Jupiter is optimism and hope, hopefulness and buoyancy and exuberance and all of those things, right? So Jupiter rules Sagittarius and Pisces, incidentally. So when we have a square from Jupiter to the new moon, squares are generally, right, 90-degree angles between two planets, in this case 3 planets, because it's the sun, the moon, and Jupiter. And squares are conversations that are more tense. There's some friction there. There is this having to work out of a tight corner, being backed into a corner and having to kind of choose a direction. having to take some action to resolve the friction or the tension in some way. But when we've got Jupiter involved, that might not feel quite as uncomfortable as if it were a square to Saturn, say, right? Or quite as intense as if it were a square to Mars or Pluto. So that's good news. So when we have this square from Jupiter to the new moon in Cancer, we have an opportunity for growth, for abundance, for wisdom, for justice, that may come about in a sort of dynamic way, because squares can be quite dynamic, or perhaps a challenging way, or there's this opportunity or change or initiation, of whatever this is for you personally. And we're going to get to that in the horoscopes, but we'll shed some light on that. But it requires some action on your part. So whatever this is that's trying to get off the ground or initiated, that you want to initiate, it's going to require you to do something about it, right? When we have a square, we can't just sit back and let things happen, like what might be the case with a trine, for example. So you might have to take some action here. And because it's Jupiter, the new thing, whatever this new thing that's being initiated is, you might have to just be mindful that it's not like growing too fast, too far, all at once. That kind of thing, because it can be challenging to keep the growth in check, or to not go over the top in some way, or to kind of, because we have Neptune involved here, and Neptune stationing on the day of the new moon, there might be some efforting to make sure that we're seeing things clearly, or we might suddenly, like I said, with this Neptune station, a veil of sorts may be lifted, and it's kind of like, oh, all right, I see this in a new way now. So how am I going to do this new thing now that I know this, or now that I see this? It could have that energy to it. And because we do have Venus in the mix, like I was talking to you about a few minutes ago, there may be hope and opportunity related to Venusian concepts like relationships, love, resources, beauty, that kind of thing. And it may be because Venus is sitting in Gemini at the time of the new moon, there may be some connection to communication, information, conversation, short travel, education, socializing, that kind of thing. The ability to see or experience things in more than one way, to see both sides or two sides of things. And it might even be that there's a choice that has to be made in terms of what direction you're going to go with this new thing, whatever this new thing is for you, right? So, sorry, I have something in my eye. And the last thing that I wanted to mention to you that I think is kind of interesting, take it for what it is, take it or leave it sort of thing, is that we do have these, like, a lot of really potent energy as related to this new moon at the 7-degree mark. So the sun and the moon are both at 7 degrees Cancer. We've got Venus in Gemini at 7 degrees, exactly sextile Jupiter and Aries at 7 degrees, right? So all those planets at 7 degrees. And so if you're somebody that is interested in numerology, that is not my wheelhouse, but I know enough to tell you that number 7 is related to concepts like it's about inner wisdom and self-awareness. So there may be an element of that going on as it relates to this new moon. Something about, getting clear on or listening to your inner wisdom, of becoming more self-aware, of making an effort to know yourself better. These sorts of things, they may come into the mix as well. So before I get right into the horoscopes here, and I'm trying to keep this a little bit shorter, you know, we're coming into the summer months, and there's a lot of activity going on here with kids, and they're about to finish school. And so I'm, you know, kind of seeing how things are going to flow through the summer. I am planning on being back with your horoscopes every 2 weeks, as always. I haven't been able to do a shorter video, which I often do. I have been doing that for the last couple of months, on alternate weeks when these horoscopes videos don't come out. I do a shorter little astro nugget video talking about a specific topic or question, right? But those may not come out regularly over the summer months. I'll kind of do them as I inspired to do them, or as I have opportunity to do them. But the horoscope videos will be here. So getting that out of the way, the next thing I want to mention before I launch into each sign is that if you are somebody who has particular placements around 7 degrees of the cardinal signs, so specifically Cancer, also Capricorn, Libra, and Aries, then you are likely to have a more kind of personal experience with this new moon, right? And if you don't have anything around those points, then you may feel other things that are going on in the sky more prominently, or you may just be noticing things that other people are experiencing, right? Or things that are going on in the world, sort of thing. But everybody has an opportunity to initiate something, particularly in the Cancer area of life. So the house that Cancer sits for you in your chart, and the themes that pertain to that house, that's the area you want to kind of pay attention to in terms of what's being initiated right now, or what you want to initiate that will continue to grow, that you will build on and grow and take action towards over the next 2 weeks. So to the Capricorn full moon that I was mentioning, that's happening in mid-July. But even longer range planning, look down the road 6 months from now to when we will have the full moon in Cancer, when we'll see whatever seeds were planted here come to kind of a time of, you know, ripening, let's say, at the full moon, or maybe even sort of a turning point at that time. But there may be events that transpire in the short term that ripen over the next couple of weeks, and you see some initial bearing of fruit, or something like that around the time of the Capricorn full moon in mid-July. Okay, so having said all that, I think it's time to launch into the horoscopes for each sign. And we're going to begin. What I'm going to do here, first of all, is I'm going to obviously speak to which house the new moon is happening in for you. There's a plane overhead. And I'm going to talk about the house that Jupiter is in, and how that's in a dynamic conversation. I'm preferring to use the word dynamic in the case of this full moon rather than challenging, because even though a square can be tense and challenging, and it may play out that way for some folks, because it's Jupiter involved, I'm getting the sense that it may be more a sense of like dynamic things are happening, right? And it's like our actions may come from a place of more of hopefulness and of optimism, that kind of thing. But the new initiation, that's kind of redundant, isn't it? Whatever we're conceiving of is happening, or whatever the universe is conceiving of for us is happening in the Cancer area of the chart. So that's what I'm going to talk about here. Okay, so we're going to begin with Cancer, because Cancer, this is your new moon. It's your new moon for the year. So it is like it's your personal new year. You know, if you're a Cancer sun, and I should have mentioned this, we're listening for our rising sign first and foremost in these general horoscopes. But if you don't know your rising sign, then definitely, and even if you do, you can listen to your sun and your moon sign as well for other like added information, right? Coming at it from a different angle, so to speak. But getting back to what I was saying, to if you're a Cancer sun or Cancer rising, this is your new moon for the year. And as a Cancer sun, it's like your personal new year, right? You're having your solar return when the sun returns to the exact location it was when you were born. You will have your solar return. And so that's like, it's a birthday essentially, and it's that personal new year. And if you are a Cancer rising, this is happening in your first house. There's a new moon in your first house, which is a very important point in the chart, because the first house speaks to sort of how we come into this world, how we present ourselves. So it has to do with us as a whole. It has to do with our mind, our body, our perception of the world, our how we come at the world, how the world perceives us. It can speak to our physical appearance, our physical vitality. It is sort of the how we steer our ship through life. And so when an event happens in the first house, it can have a big impact in general on our lives. And so this is an opportunity to begin something new as it pertains to you and yourself, and perhaps your relationship to yourself and to your physical incarnation and all of those things, that I just mentioned. Oh, sorry, shaking the camera. And you have this square to Jupiter and Jupiter's sitting in the 10th house in Aries, right? Jupiter's in Aries, and that's your 10th house as a Cancer rising. And so the 10th house is about our public life, and our ambitions and our career, how we sort of put ourselves out there in the world, right? The things we're doing publicly, legacy projects, right? The legacy you wish to leave. Like if you're somebody who is retired, or you're not working in a typical kind of, job, then this is about sort of you on the public stage, like not things that are happening sort of personally at home. That's the 4th house in your private life, but more in your public realm, right? And again, like legacy projects and things like that. It can have to do with authority and authority figures as well. So my point is, that's not where the new moon is, but that's where Jupiter is. And so there is this interplay, this dynamic interplay going on between things that are happening in your public career legacy house and something new being initiated as it relates to you. So it could be that there's some public event, or there's some public recognition, perhaps in terms of career, some career growth. It is Jupiter in the 10th house that is happening, that is on offer. And there's some kind of like tension between that and your personal vitality. Maybe it's taking a toll, and so you have to do things new as it pertains to your physical vitality, or there's something new going on for you, whether it be, your body, or how you approach life, how the world is perceiving you in some way, shape, or form. Health, because our body is related to our health. And so there can be something going on there. There's something new being initiated, and maybe it's new, and it's something that's like, it's very public in some way, and that can feel, on the one hand, buoyant and optimistic and hopeful, but on the other hand can also be a little bit like a lot a lot to handle, a lot to navigate, a little bit sort of over the top, and that could be, something that's happening in the public realm. So hopefully that makes sense to you, and you can, that's enough for you to work with. I think I gave you a couple of examples there. I'll just take it in a different direction before I move on, and give you one last example, Cancer. So I'm seeing this too as potentially being something like career. There's a big change or shift or growth, career growth, happening that causes you to be perceived in a different way, a new title or something like that. There could be an abundance of whatever it is in relation to your career, that is taking some kind of a, it's causing you to have to do things in a new and different way, or to initiate something new, like a new personal, like a new way of relating to yourself in some way, if that makes sense. So, okay, I think I'm going to leave that there because I'm starting to ramble now. And if you have comments or questions, definitely leave them below. I always try to get to every single person, and it may take a little while, but I do try to respond personally. At this point, if things grow, and the channel's growing slowly but surely, but we'll revisit that if the need arises. But at this point, I do endeavor to answer everybody's questions and comments. So thanks for those. Okay, I'm going to leave that there for you, Cancer. I'm going to move on to Leo now. Leo, for you, this for Leo rising, specifically, the new moon is happening in your 12th house, right? But again, if you're a Leo sun or moon, you could be listening for information for that as well. So a new moon in the 12th house speaks to something new being initiated, conceived of, intended, as it relates to 12th house themes of retreat. So how you retreat from the daily grind kind of thing, how you spend time in solitude. This can be things like actual taking a retreat or stepping back from daily life in some way, a vacation, even something involving, that kind of a retreat. Or sometimes this is like stepping away from the daily chaos and the daily grind and the daily routine in such a way that it's kind of taking you away from your responsibilities, because there is something going on in the realm of like some kind of setting, like a healthcare setting, like hospitals, hospices, long-term care facilities, even things like rehab facilities. And when I say rehab facilities, that could be things like physical rehab, but it could also be rehab from addictions, that sort of thing. It could be like detention facilities, prisons, even those sorts of things, right? Those can all be 12th house related. And of course, that's not going to pertain to everybody, but it might pertain to some of you in some way, shape, or form. So something new going on in that realm, something new being initiated. And it may have, there may be something related to family there, or those familial bonds, because it is in the sign of Cancer, remember? So this could have to do with Cancerian themes, and we spoke about all that in the intro. I'm not going to go over it again here. So it could be like, because like there's a family member that's dealing with those issues, so there's some new arrangement going on. Or it could be if you're taking some sort of retreat or vacation or something along those lines, it may involve, familial bonds or those kinds of things as well. Or when I think of Cancer in the 12th house, and a new moon, there may be like, who knows, this could have to do with a like some kind of an Airbnb situation, or maybe you're trying that for the first time, or it's something that like maybe you are starting that, or it's some kind of a vacation retreat place or something like that. Okay, so that's the 12th house. The 12th house, let's just finish off there, can also have to do with like the endings of things, because it is the last house, right? Of the zodiac. It can have to do with the unseen world in some way, our dream life, our spiritual life and practices. It can have to do with things that are hidden. So like they're not within our conscious awareness. They may be, unconscious, or just like secrets or things that we're not seeing, our blind spots. That can be 12th house related as well. Okay, so that's where the new thing is happening. That's where the initiation is happening. That's where you're intending something new, or the universe is intending something new for you. Now, there's a square from Jupiter. Jupiter's sitting in Aries in your 9th house, in your case, right? And we talked about the interplay of Jupiter in the intro. But Jupiter sitting in the 9th house is speaking to like the expansion and the growth and the opportunity and the optimism, potentially, things revolving around wisdom, justice, education, travel, foreign people and places, is sitting there in your 9th house. And there's some kind of something very dynamic going on between Jupiter and this new moon. There may be a challenge, between whatever those 9th house things are that are happening for you, the growth and such that's going on there, and how that interplays with your ability to retreat or take a break or deal with some kind of issue that's going on in one of those, facilities that I mentioned, in relation to one of those facilities that I mentioned. There could be new information that comes in. You learn something new. And this could be having to do with people at a distance, or different ideologies, or your kind of how you view the world. And it somehow, there's a lot going on there. And again, it somehow is in this dynamic, very active, very potentially challenging in some ways, relationship to your ability to rest, retreat, recover, recuperate, take a vacation, or again, interfering with things that are connected to one of those places I mentioned. And something else that just came into my head was that there may be something like new information might come in that was previously you were not aware of. And it may come in from a source, like I said, a 9th house source, right? Educational sphere, something involving people in places that are far away, at a distance, something involving justice in some way, those sorts of things. So I feel like there's so much more I could say here, but I'm going to leave it at that for you, Leo, and mull that over, chew on that, and see how it pertains to you. And maybe ultimately, you need to take the initiative, which is a new moon word, to take back some time for yourself, to retreat, to spend some time in solitude and rest, and those kinds of things, right? So that's a possibility. Okay, we're going to leave that there, Leo. We're going to move on to Virgo now. And Virgo, for you, this new moon is conceiving of something new, initiating something new in your 11th house of the group. So this has to do with your connections, right? So friendship groups, but networks as well. And this can be online communities. It can be any kind of sort of group you're associated with in some way, organizations, clubs, special interest groups. Again, like I said, online communities, anything like that. And also very much to do with your allies and your supporters, and what we would call benefactors, or the people that can help you get where you want to go. And because the 11th house is also connected to our vision for the future, our hopes and dreams for the future. So, something new on offer there, or something new that maybe you're intending, right? Or the universe is intending for you, something new being conceived of. And it may have this familial flavor to it because it is in the sign of Cancer. It may feel like, it involves your sort of tribe in some way, whether that's like family of origin or chosen family. It may have to do with nurturing sort of figures, as it is in Cancer, with your roots, with home, those kinds of things, right? All those Cancerian themes that we spoke about in the intro. So the new thing is happening there. And then there's this square from Jupiter in Aries, which is in your 8th house. So Jupiter in Aries is exactly squaring this new moon. And so it's bringing something very dynamic, but potentially kind of challenging or tricky to work through as well. But there's some kind of like, there's a sense of growth and optimism and abundance, and hopefully not like sort of like taking it over the top, and that is somehow connected to other people's resources, which is 8th house, your entanglements with other people, your intimate connections, the things that maybe kind of, the feeling like they're not within your control. The 8th house is a place where we often have to kind of surrender because we're not in the driver's seat, and so that can feel a bit uncomfortable. It can have us a little bit fearful. It can have us feeling like we really want to hang on to things because it's not in our control, right? And so there can be something going on there, and on a practical level, this can be related to, like I said, other people's resources. So things like taxes, inheritance, wills, powers of attorney, scholarships, loans, anything you can think of like that, right? And so there is this square from Jupiter in that house to the new moon. And so there's something like, I'm trying to think on a practical level what this could involve. And it may be something new. You want to initiate something new in a group setting, or there's something going on, something transpiring in a group setting in relation to other people, in relation to maybe supporters and allies, and there's something here that's needing to be dealt with in the realm of like other people's resources, your entanglements with other people. It can feel big. It can feel like a lot to kind of handle because it's in the 8th house, and it can feel overwhelming. It can feel even quite like, how do I control all this, right? How do I rein this in, and so that it can work in cooperation with whatever this group dynamic is that's going on in some way. It also, I'm going to take this in a different direction. This new thing can have to do in some ways with the friends of your kids. I always like to say this. I never hear any other astrologers talking about this, but in my experience, this has been a big 11th house thing. So it can have to do, if this pertains to you, with experiences, something new experience that's going on with your kids' friends, and it may be somehow there's a connection to, other people's resources. Like I said, those 8th house things that feel like a little bit daunting and beyond your control. This notion of big transformation, right? In the eighth house with Jupiter there as well. Some sort of big transformation going on in the eighth house regarding those themes that I mentioned. And it has to do with the new thing that's transpiring in your 11th house of the group, friends, benefactors, supporters, your vision for the future, that kind of thing. So hopefully that gives you enough to go on, Virgo. I'm trying to think if there's anything else. I mean, just to kind of like distill it down a little bit and give you some simple examples, and we're just talking about something new in the 11th house. This might be a new friendship group you connect to. It might, that kind of feels like family, or it might be new supporters and allies and a plan for that, that you're making. It can feel like some new, like, hope for the future, even in the 11th house. Okay, I've said enough there. I'm going to move on because, I'm rambling on here. So we're going to move on to Libra now. Excuse me. Libra, this new moon for you is taking place in your 10th house. So is there some kind of new opportunity or something new you're hoping for or initiating or conceiving of that has to do with your career, with your public life, with a legacy project, a legacy you wish to leave in some way, that has to do with your ambitions, that has to do with authority figures, your sense of authority in the world, that has to do with your material security, that has to do with even like parental kind of figures, that maybe, or the idea of the more authoritarian, parental figure potentially as well in the 10th house. So something new there, right, is getting off the ground, is being initiated at this new moon in Cancer. And it may have to do with family and emotional ties and ancestry and all those Cancerian things that we talked about in the intro. And in some way, there is a challenge. There is something quite dynamic being presented from the 7th house of one-to-one relationships, because Jupiter is there in Aries, and that's your 7th house, right? And Jupiter is in an exact square, like we mentioned, to this new moon. And so there's something blowing up here when we talk about Jupiter, and it may be an abundance of something, or something feeling more hopeful or optimistic, or something growing in relation to your one-to-one relationships. So this can be directly like a significant other, a marriage partner or significant other in some way, or other important people in your life that you're close to, close friends and family members, business associates, business partners, rivals even. Or this can be something going on in one of those people's lives, like your partner's life. Or it can also be related to contracts and agreements. So something's going on there. Maybe your partner is experiencing growth in some way. Like that's just one way to look at it. And then that somehow is impacting what's going on in your 10th house of career, of public life, those kinds of things. And it's hopeful and optimistic, but it's maybe a lot to deal with. It can feel quite dynamic. It can feel a bit challenging trying to balance those things or kind of work with that. It might have to do with how your relationships are somehow interacting with your career or your public life, or your some legacy project or something like that, right? And so again, there can be some things to work through there, some decisions to make But ultimately, whatever new thing it is wants to happen in relation to, again, your public life, your career, legacy projects, um, authority figures, that kind of thing, right? Because it is in your 10th house. Like, for some reason, I can almost see this as, this could be some kind of like a business opportunity or business growth potential, or something having to do with your career and your partner's career, or your, you know, business, maybe business growth, like business associates, something going on there. Like there's growth happening there. There may be optimism and abundance happening there, and somehow it has to do with your career or your public life. And it can be, you know, quite, like I said, quite dynamic at the time of this new moon. So and keep in mind, Libra, that, you know, whatever is initiated right now, you're growing that, or it's growing towards something flourishing over the next couple of weeks. When we hit the new moon in Capricorn, you may see the first inklings of that, or you may have there may be some kind of a turning point that happens there. But this can also be longer range. When we're talking about 6 months down the road, there will be a full moon in this same area of the chart, right? In the 10th house. So something may bear fruit in relation to your career, your public life, that kind of thing at that point in the year. Okay, so I think that's good. Libra, I'm going to leave that there. I'm going to move it on to Scorpio now, where Scorpio, for you, you have this new moon happening in your 9th house, right? So new seeds being planted, something new being conceived of by you or the universe as it relates to your ideology, like your worldview, how you see the world, foreign people and places, foreign travel, expanding your horizons in some way, adventuring in some way, justice, law, education, wisdom, traditions. These are all things that have the potential for something new to be sparked in that area of life. And there is this square from Jupiter, and Jupiter sitting in Aries, which in your case is the 6th house. And there's something growing there. There's an abundance of something on offer there. There is learning and growing happening there. There's growth in some way happening as it pertains to your daily routine, to your health and well-being, to issues around like hard work and how you are of service, and that sort of nose to the grindstone, you know, the thankless work we do on the day to day, whether it be paid or unpaid, right? It can have to do with like keeping things in order, like checking off the ticky boxes. I don't know if I use that phrase yet, but the order of life, right? Keeping things in order, as opposed to the 12th house, which is opposite the 6th, which is more kind of like escaping that daily order and routine. So if you catch my drift. 6th house can also have to do with pets as well. So we've got Jupiter here. There's growth, there's abundance, there's optimism, there's maybe going over the top here in some way, maybe learning something about those subjects in some way. But this is related to or interplaying with, at the time of this new moon, you know, the sun and the moon in your 9th house. So something new getting off the ground in that 9th house, but it's being challenged in a way by Jupiter in your 6th house. It's not necessarily in a bad way though. Like it's like, it can just feel like quite dynamic, quite like a lot of growth at once. It can feel like there's a lot to handle and navigate there in those 6th house, regarding those 6th house themes. But ultimately, it's giving you something to work with that can help you initiate, the new thing in the ninth house of, again, travel, of, expanding your horizons in some way, shape, or form, to put it simply. So I feel like Jupiter is just going woo right now, right? Or maybe that's the Neptune piece, like we spoke about in the intro as well. So definitely listen to that. But just to kind of distill it down and make it a little simpler, and give you some specific examples of what when we're talking about a new moon in the ninth house, what new thing might be initiated for us, or might we plan to initiate, or might be initiated for us or in relation to us in some way. So that might be something involving school, education. Usually this is higher learning we're talking about. So it's something involving, like, oftentimes it's like college, university, or post-secondary in some way, shape, or form, right? Or something that you're learning beyond the basics. It can have to do with, I don't know if I said this already, but travel, something connected to foreign cultures, foreign people and places, something that has to do with expanding your mind in some way, something related to justice in some way. So, an adventure in some way could be ninth house. So those are all things that are potentials for you at this new moon. And they may be related to family, tribe, emotional security, all those Cancerian themes we talked about in the intro. Okay, Scorpio, enough said. We're going to move on to Sagittarius now, as soon as I take a sip of water, because I am talking and talking. Okay, so Sagittarius, this new moon for you is in your 8th house. So something new being conceived of, something new being initiated in relation to other people's resources. That's the 8th house. Your entanglements with other people, things that have felt or feel kind of beyond your control. Something related to subjects like taxes, wills, inheritance, debt, loans, bursaries, scholarships, anything like that. Some sense of transformation and a rebirth of sorts, right? These are all 8th house themes. Intimate entanglements, I don't know if I mentioned that yet. So there is something new on offer here, or something new that you're conceiving of at the time of this new moon, and it may have to do with family, tribe, all of those Cancer concepts. But there is some dynamic energy at play between this new moon and Jupiter in Aries. And for you, that's your 5th house. So the 5th house is about children, your creative projects and self-expression, anything you create, it speaks to how you enjoy life, what brings you pleasure and joy, and how you have fun. So Jupiter's there expanding that area for you in some way. And at the time of this new moon, there's an interplay here. So there's something associated, like there's something going on, some growth, abundance, maybe optimism, Jupiter, something maybe over the top going on. And it's somehow related to a new thing that's being initiated in relation to your 8th house. And we just talked about all the themes, right? So this could be, let's give you some examples. There could be it could be a loan or something as simple as that, or a remortgaging or something. It could be, having to sort of borrow money because your kids are going off to college or something, or there's a lot of expenditures going on, and so there has to be some reworking of, finances. There could be something going on with like inheritance or wills as it pertains to your kids. Like your kids could get some kind of a windfall, maybe. Or there's some project or some sort of kind of intimate connection or entanglement that is connected to the growth and abundance of pleasure and joy, potentially as well. Let me think if there's any other examples. Oh, something that just came to mind. There could be this could be something going on with like therapy or something like that, and it somehow impacts your kids, or your kids are involved, or it allows you to bring more joy and pleasure into your life. Or just thought of one other thing, or perhaps there's a real craving for more fun, more joy, more pleasure, that kind of thing. But there's a bit of something to work out here, but attention to work out, because there may be debt that needs to be repaid before that can happen, or there may be waiting for a tax return so that you can do something fun with it. These kinds of things, So hopefully that gives you enough to go on, Sagittarius. And I will leave that there, and I'm going to move on to Capricorn now. Capricorn, for you, you've got the new moon happening in your 7th house. So there is something new being initiated, something new being conceived of, that revolves around your one-to-one close relationships. And this now can have to do with some kind of familial bonds, any of those Cancerian themes, right? Family, tribe, roots, ancestry, emotional security, these sorts of things. But it's connected to your one-to-one relationships. So your partner in some way, shape, or form, if that's relevant to you, right? A significant other, a close friend and family member, a business partner, something going on in your partner's life, or somebody that's very close to you. This can have to do with contracts and agreements. This can have to do with rivals for some of you. But there is something new, maybe the initiation of a new partnership, some new way of doing relationship. If you're in a committed partnership, it could be like something new going on for your partner. And there's an interplay here with Jupiter in your 4th house. So Jupiter in Aries is your 4th house. And as I was saying in the intro, it's in a square, an exact square to this new moon. So although Jupiter's growth, abundance, optimism, all those things, it may feel a bit like there's a lot to manage here at the time of this new moon, because it can feel quite dynamic, right? A square ultimately is tension that needs to be worked through. It doesn't always mean it's bad tension. In fact, when we work through the tension of a square, big growth can happen. Big things can happen when we work with that energy proactively. So, but it's just that at the time of the new moon here, we're having something new being initiated in the 7th house realm, and it's being fed by, or potentially challenged by in some way, or needing to be acted on in some way, things that revolve around your home, your family, your place of living, real estate, your roots. These are all fourth house themes. So what can this look like? Goodness, this can be something new is happening for your partner, 7th house. And it involves some kind of growth at home, or some kind of learning opportunity at home, or as it pertains to even real estate or place of living, or something something involving there's a lot excuse me, a lot of there can be abundance coming in, right, on the home front. Maybe this is real estate ventures, maybe this is who knows what, but it's somehow connected to your family ties, your bonds, even connected somehow to your sense of emotional security. There's growth there, there's cause for optimism. But there's also something tense going on that involves your partner or partnerships or significant other or contract and agreement, that kind of thing. And I don't get the sense that this is necessarily, when I say tense, like, it doesn't mean it's like bad tense. It just means that, like, whew, at the end we kind of look back and go, wow, that was like, that was a lot. That was a lot to deal with, right? But ultimately it allowed things to grow, and it was an opportunity for a new beginning in some way, because it's a new moon. So I hope that means something to you. And again, just very simply, this could just be simply something going on in the life of a partner, or something as it pertains to a relationship, a new relationship even, can transpire around the time of this new moon. So I'm going to leave that there for you, Capricorn. There's always more to say, but I think that's enough. And I'm going to move on to Aquarius now. Aquarius, for you, this new moon happens in your 6th house. So, pardon me, there is a new event, or a new something being initiated by you or by the universe, right? Something new being conceived of that will grow over the next couple of weeks' time to the full moon in Capricorn. But then furthermore, this is something that has the potential to grow over the next 6 months and bear fruit at the Cancer full moon in 6 months' time. So, but whatever it is, Aquarius, it relates to your sense of well-being in the 6th house. So issues around health and illness. It relates to your work that you do on the day-to-day, whether that's paid or unpaid work, how you are of service, that kind of like, our daily, like putting one foot in front of the other, checking off the ticky boxes kind of thing. It has to do with labor. It has to do with pets potentially. So there's an opportunity here for something new. And ultimately there's a dynamic conversation going on between the sun and the moon and Jupiter, right? I spoke about this in the intro. Jupiter is in Aries, and it's an exact square to this new moon. And for you, Jupiter is in Aries in the 3rd house. That's where Aries sits for you as an Aquarius rising. And so there is growth, expansion, abundance, wisdom being gained, the learning of things, justice. All of these concepts, they have to do specifically with the realm of the 3rd house for you, and the 3rd house topics of siblings, cousins, neighbors, peers, teammates, community, short travel, teaching and learning, your daily communications, potentially vehicles, moving parts. I always see the 3rd house, commerce, marketing. 3rd house is a busy, busy place. So it's kind of like all the things that are swirling around on the day to day. And so there's something there. There's growth going on there in some way. Abundance, like I was saying, opportunity as far as Jupiter goes. And it is in a bit of a tense conversation, or dynamic conversation is a better word, I think, in this case, with those 6th house topics, like I spoke to you about. Whether that be for you, that might be about pets, that might be about health and wellness, it might be about your daily work, that kind of thing, right? So it can feel like maybe a lot to handle, but ultimately in order to begin some new initiative or something new, in that sixth house realm. So if you're going to begin something in the sixth house, what might that be? Well, it might have to do with new pets coming in. It might have to do with a new work arrangement, your daily work kind of thing. It might have to do with like hard work that you're doing on the day to day that you're not getting the moolah for, you're not getting paid for. It's just the hard labor of life. It is. It can have to do with your physical kind of health and wellness, routines and what you do, like that. Your sense of health and illness speaks to the sixth house. So something new there, like some kind of a new routine around that could be going on. A new work kind of routine going on. And it's impacted in some way by the third house, right? So communications, and all those themes that I already mentioned that I won't repeat myself here. But that's where Jupiter is sitting for you. So if you have a listen to the introduction, I'm sure that will kind of spark kind of like, oh, okay, so this is what this is about for me. Or this is, if you were to initiate something new intentionally as it pertains to those sixth house themes that I just mentioned, what might it be? Because now's the time to do it. And it might even involve your sense of emotional security, a sense of tribe or family or community in some way, because it is, Cancer. So think about that. And what is it that's getting off the ground or that you are intentionally trying to initiate at the time of this new moon? Okay, enough said there, Aquarius. I'm going to move on to Pisces now. Pisces, for you, you've got the new moon happening in your fifth house. So a new moon in Cancer in the fifth house, Pisces. So this is something new being conceived of, a new beginning in some way, shape, or form that is revolving around how you have fun, what brings you pleasure, your kids, if that pertains to you, things you create, your creative self-expression and projects, hobbies, special interests, those kinds of things that bring you joy and pleasure. And so something new here, something new maybe in the life of your children in some way. And this can be something you're intending or something that's just happening that's new. And it will grow over the next couple of weeks in some way, kind of bear fruit or reach a climax at the full moon in Capricorn on July 14th. But then it will also grow over time and reach a bearing of fruit or a culmination point at the full moon in Cancer, right? In the same house. 6 months down the road from now. So you can kind of look at that long range planning here in terms of the fifth house topics that I just spoke about. And you have Jupiter in Aries, which is the second house for you, that's squaring the new moon, right? And I talked about this in the intro, but here I will say to you that there is some kind of like growth, cause for optimism, hope, faith, wisdom being gained, potentially all those, I don't know if I used the word abundance yet, but those Jupiterian themes, because Jupiter is growing that area of life for you in your second house. And that's about your personal resources, your money, your finances, your sense of like getting your basic needs met, and what you value and place worth on, your material possessions even, right? Those are second house themes. So there's some goodness going on there with Jupiter. But at the time of this new moon, it's in this dynamic, potentially like challenging conversation with fifth house, which is again, kids, pleasure, this kind of thing, right? So like I see this as, oh, maybe there's going to be a chunk of change being spent on some kind of like a pleasure pursuit, or something involving your kids. There's something your kids want to do that's new, that's causing, like, maybe it's going to cost some money, maybe it's going to impact the finances, or maybe it's an opportunity to teach your kids about things like finances and personal values and worth and that kind of thing as well. Your kids could get a windfall of some description, and it could just kind of feel like something that needs to be, like, decisions need to be made, action needs to be taken, because it's a square and it's dynamic. It's not like we just sit back and let it happen. So those are some things to look for you, Pisces. But a new beginning there, in that fifth house. And there may be some relation again to like, there may be a familial tie, or something involving those Cancer topics that we covered in the intro. Okay, I'm going to leave that there, Pisces. I'm going to move it along to Aries now. So Aries, for you, you have the new moon happening in your fourth house. So there is a new moon in Cancer in the fourth house, which is a comfortable place there for Cancer, because the fourth house is all about home, family, roots, ancestry, your private life, it's about parenting, parental figures. I think I said emotional security already, real estate, these sorts of things. So for you, Aries, something new on offer there, something new being initiated by you or the universe that will reach a climax in some way in a couple weeks' time, around the time of the Capricorn full moon on July 14th. But furthermore, like, if you look down the road 6 months to the Cancer full moon, that's when you may see some real bearing of fruit, or something reaching a turning point in relation to the seeds that are planted now, because it's in the same area of the chart, right? This fourth house that I was just speaking about. And then you have Jupiter in your sign right now. So you know how we were talking about there's a square from Jupiter in Aries, your sign, to the new moon, right? And that is a dynamic conversation. So it's a conversation that may be requiring some action and decision making and activity, and maybe a few challenges as well. But it has to do, Jupiter is growing, expanding, bringing a sense of optimism, and those sorts of things directly to you and your experience in the world, because it's in your first house. So it revolves around your experience of life, how you kind of steer your ship through life, how the world perceives you, your physicality. These sorts of things are first house topics. And so something going on there as it relates to your fourth house and the new beginnings that are happening there. So I see, like, for whatever reason, something that just came to mind here is that there is something new going on as it relates to your home. And it's like your experience of life changes in some way, or is impacted. This could be, okay, I can see this as being like if you're somebody who's like a parent or a grandparent and you don't have kids at home, like, I don't know, I can see this like as a somehow kind of like an expansion to your living space, new people coming in. I can see this as maybe like, yeah, you could literally be an addition, putting an addition on, moving to a bigger space, some new, like a real estate venture, or something new as it relates to your familial ties and your ancestry, and that, like, you're experiencing personal growth and there's a connection here somehow to those two things. What else could I say about this? New family member. I don't know if I mentioned that already. Like I get this. I don't know why this is coming into my mind. It's like you have a kid. They are potentially, getting married or what have you. And therefore, you're now, an in-law. I don't know. That just came to mind. Or this could be you're going to move house and it impacts you in a way that feels like growth in some way. Hopefully that makes sense. But I mean, those kinds of things require decision making, action, all of that, right? It's dynamic. If you're moving, that's a dynamic situation. Even if it's like cause for excitement, there's a lot of action going on there. So, it's something like that. I can see something like that going on. I can see your emotional well-being in some way, like kind of like turning over a new leaf there because of a self perception or something, like because of personal growth in some way as well. Okay, so I think that's enough to go on. Aries, I will say, because this new moon is squaring your sign and you've got Jupiter there, like if you're in Aries that has planets around the 7th degree, you're going to feel this more potently. Okay, so I'll leave you with that. I'm going to move on to Taurus now. Taurus, for you, you've got the new moon happening in your 3rd house. So Taurus, there's something new on offer, something new being conceived of by you or the universe that revolves around your daily communications, potentially, your environment that you occupy on the day to day. And when I say environment, it's not like, I'm not talking about like your home per se. I'm talking about like all the things you encounter on the day to day, right? And the people even that you communicate with. So oftentimes we think of the 3rd house as a house of siblings, right? Your peers, your workmates, your cousins, your neighbors, your community members. It's your daily communications and the things you use to that end. Your short kind of commutes, short distance travel. It is about education in some way, right? The learning of new things. And we can also include things like elementary school, high school, learning the basics. What else can we include in the 3rd house? Commerce, marketing, your kind of daily ritual, So those are 3rd house themes. I think I covered them all. I'm just thinking here. And so there's something new on offer there, something new you are being called to initiate. And there's something going on. There's a conversation happening, a dynamic interplay between whatever this new thing is that's trying to get off the ground and Jupiter in your 12th house in Aries. So, because it's an exact square, right? We covered all this in the intro. And so Jupiter is growing, expanding, bringing a sense of abundance, opportunity, enlightenment even, or perhaps like kind of even going over the top in some way, because Jupiter can do that, growth out of control. And that's in this area of life that is very kind of secret. It's behind closed doors. It is what we do when we're in solitude. It is how we retreat from the daily grind and from the world. That can be spiritual practice. That can be through our dream life, but it can also be through unhealthy escapism, right? Addictions and things like that. It can be through sometimes like because we're having to retreat or we're having to spend time in a place like and this could be not because it's you that's there, but it could be somebody else that's there. But, you know, a hospital, a hospice, a spiritual retreat center, a rehab facility of some description, a detention facility, these kinds of things, right, can be implicated when we're talking about the 12th house. The 12th house is our blind spots, sort of what we can't see, sometimes secrets. You know, so these are all things. It's a bit elusive. But Jupiter's there and it's growing that, and it's, you know, Jupiter is the benefic. So this may not feel like it's very different than Saturn moving through the 12th, right? This may be cause for optimism in some way. This can be spending time in solitude feels hopeful and abundant and optimistic. It could be you get to go on a vacation or a retreat, or you know, and this is like Jupiter's in Aries for longer than a hot minute here. So this is a process, but at the time of the new moon, there is some dynamic going on between Jupiter and whatever new thing wants to be initiated in that third house. And it may require a lot of like back and forth, maybe a lot of action, decision making. It could feel exciting, but it could also feel a bit overwhelming, you know? So these are some things to consider. You could be, let me think about this. There could be something new going on in the life of a sibling. There could be some kind of an initiation in regards to education in some way. Or a new type of communication, or new communication tools, new vehicles even in the third house. It could be something new around like a retreat that's like, you know, these short little trips that we take for maybe like weekend jaunts, things like that even. So those are all things to consider. All right. So I think I've said enough there, Taurus, and you can definitely, you know, listen to the introduction, because I said I spoke to the Neptune piece and various other things in the intro. So if you haven't listened to that yet, then please definitely do that. And I think that is enough to go on for you. And I think I did mention, you know, we're looking at this 2-week growth period to the full moon in Capricorn, where we may see the manifestation of something related to whatever starts here at the Cancer new moon. But then even 6 months down the road, look to that same area, that third house area of the chart, for what is blossoming then, or what you're working towards blossoming over the longer haul, right? Okay, so that's for you, Taurus. And last but not least, in this instance, we've got Gemini. So Gemini, you are experiencing this new moon in your second house, and themes related to the second house, which are your personal finances, right? So money, and also your personal resources in other ways. So that can be money. It can also be time and energy. It could be material possessions. Second house is what you value and place worth on. It's getting your basic needs met, right? How we get our basic needs met in the second house. So there's something new on offer here. It's a new way of doing this. It's an opportunity to do this differently. Or a new source of income, or a new way of dealing with finances, or new possessions even. It could have to do, and this could have to do with like family members, parental figures, you know, your tribe in some way. Can have to do with an element of emotional security, right? These are all the Cancer themes. We spoke about that in the intro, because this is a new moon in Cancer in the second house. So those are the themes where like there's something new going on here, something new being initiated by you or by the universe. And there is a dynamic at play that involves Jupiter in Aries, which for you is the 11th house, in a square to this new moon. So a 90-degree angle, right? Which we often think of as some sort of tension or friction that needs to be worked through. But because it's Jupiter, it may feel like growth and cause for optimism and abundance in some way, and not some tension and friction and, you know, that kind of thing that feels necessarily too heavy. It could feel like a lot to deal with, a lot to manage, but there is a sense of optimism and hope as well. There is a sense of growth potential. It just might require a lot of activity, a lot of decision making, a lot of, you know, that kind of thing. So what could this be? Well, I mean, I already mentioned like a new opportunity for income, for you making money, a new way of getting your basic needs met, a new something new revolving around your self-worth, or revolving around your material possessions in some way. And so, and Jupiter in the 11th house of the group, of the organizations, associations, clubs, networks, those kinds of things that you're involved in somehow, but very much also about your supporters and your allies and your vision for the future, right? There's some dynamic going on here between growth in that area and cause for optimism, right? And perhaps wisdom being gained, you know, those sorts of things, perhaps some element of justice, even when we're talking about Jupiter. That won't pertain to everybody, but and it's in this dynamic conversation with, again, your personal resources, right? So, and then those second house themes, like I'm just thinking about like specific examples of like something that comes to mind would be a new income stream that somehow has to do with like there's a group supporting you in some way. There's growth on offer, and it's somehow related to a group setting, or some kind of like some allies or supporters, or some, you know, vision for the future in some way. There's growth happening on the friendship front potentially, right? Because that's the 11th house. And somehow there's a new opportunity arising that's connected to that for you to make money, gather more material possessions, you know, use your time and energy differently, that kind of thing. You get my drift? So hopefully that speaks to you, Gemini. Definitely listen to the intro. You're going to get some added pieces there that will help bring this all together and make sense. But that is the horoscope for the Cancer new moon that is happening on the 28th of June, 2022. For all 12 signs. So thanks so much for being here. Please remember to subscribe and hit the like button, and I will catch you again very soon. And I will definitely catch you for your next set of horoscopes, which will be for the Capricorn full moon that's happening on July 14th, 2022. Okay, take good care. Thanks for being here. Bye for now.